do you take actions, make them into transactions, measure their conversions, and then optimize for future performance? How do we turn that into something that's going to be meaningful for you, the people you're trying to reach or people you're trying to influence?
Hi, I'm Bruno Aziza, and today I'm sitting down with Brian Solis. Brian, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
It's difficult to introduce you because everybody knows Brian Solis. You're a social media anthropologist. You write books. Your latest book was Engage, and you help us understand what it is like to engage via social media. I think you have this mantra you use, engage or die.
Yes.
So take us through the first principle, which I think you called 9-inch marketing for our audience, so they understand what social media and marketing is in general.
Yeah, first, social media anthropologist. I don't know that I've actually been described that way, but I'll take it. I like it because it actually sets up the whole premise around engage or die around the notion of digital Darwinism. Okay. How really brands are at the cusp of this crossroads, or at the beginning of this crossroads where they have to make a decision about irrelevance or relevance. And social media is actually a wonderful way, even if you never say anything, a wonderful way to learn how to be more relevant or how to be more meaningful to the markets that are important to the bottom line.
How do you get started? What's the first thing you need to think about to figure out if you're even relevant?
Well, it starts with research, right? And that's certain brands have always researched. I mean, business intelligence is something that I'm starting to wonder if it's an oxymoron like military intelligence, where I don't know that we're necessarily learning as much as we should, and more importantly, taking that learning and applying it across the organization. One of the things that we learn in research, especially within social media, is that it's a very emotional landscape, and the concept of 9-inch marketing, which isn't new. In fact, there's a great blog called 9-inch marketing, which is the distance between the heart and the mind is 9 inches, and really for social media, effective engagement is to appeal to one or both. And I have this graphic where it shows sort of communication of how it's coming out of the brand and how it's either connecting with one or both or flying over the head. And more importantly, that relationship becomes more meaningful over time as it not just conversations going two-way, but actually interaction and learning and reaction going two-way. So it just becomes an evolving relationship where research plays a huge part in understanding not only how to be more relevant, but also how to measure the effectiveness of engagement and how to be better over time.
So let's talk more about that, because I do see lots of people almost getting above the head on that subject and wondering, what do I measure and how do I think about measuring success of social media or my impact? What are some of the things that you can give us there?
A lot of this has to start at the very beginning. I think many businesses cannonballed into the pool of social media without necessarily understanding why they were doing so. Yeah. So, for example, get on Facebook, get on Twitter, create a YouTube channel. It's fine. For the most part, consumers are also learning too. Yeah. So they were following. But as this matures, there has to be some sort of meaning in the interaction for a person who's followed or liked a brand to stay connected. Otherwise, they disconnect. And when they disconnect, it's almost impossible. And I don't have any hard data on this, but I'd have to just imagine from experience, it's almost impossible to get them back. So there has to be some sort of drivers in that. So we see initial research mirroring more monitoring and reporting. So what's taking place? And we're using that data to justify the need to be in social media or to demonstrate sort of progress. So, we have 1,000 followers last month. We have 2,000 followers this month. And what does that mean? I don't know, but it's growth. So we must be doing something right. We're looking at positive, negative sentiment without necessarily deconstructing what that sentiment means, what's causing the positive so that we can enforce or evoke more of it, what's causing the negative so that we can learn from it, maybe try to steer experiences in a positive direction. It just becomes a metric or a barometer. We're at 60% positive, great. But what can we do to learn from that to be more engaging, to be more effective? So really, this idea of research and intelligence comes down to not how to be more effective in just social media, but how to be actually a more customer-centric organization, how to be more relevant, how to be the type of organization that actually doesn't just speak to you as a consumer, but speaks, to your heart and mind, because you actually, in social media, have a choice as to who you connect with and why.
So you're taking us through something that's fairly traditional in business intelligence, which is the difference between monitoring and listening. Monitoring is very much looking backwards and kind of justifying why you've been
Right.
investing versus listening, which engage, I guess, more something more active, and then which requires that you go beyond what you'd be doing. What are some of the companies that you think are cutting edge or that are great examples of great listeners?
Well, I'll start by saying this. This is not a new discussion. I think just social media is renewing the importance of the idea of intelligence. When we look at analytics or monitoring, for example, it's like trying to drive looking in the rearview mirror. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to take that and maybe even before we get behind the wheel, is figure out where we want to go so that we can drive there and bring some passengers along for a great drive. Some companies that I see doing this very well, and again, I like to look at things, especially now and moving forward, you'll start to see me expand beyond just social media. Social media is wonderful because you can engage and you can also learn, but also the real opportunity is how do you create a more connected or adaptive business, right? And so how do you connect the dots internally? How do you connect the dots externally? So for example, Virgin America is a company that I admire because they're using social media as an enabler to be a better airline, to provide a better customer experience. And so that entire experience has been architected. For example, when you visit virginamerica.com, the experience is intentional. How you look for flights, how you book flights, how you check into your member rewards program. It's all a very nicely streamlined and efficient yet elegant experience.
Interesting.
When you come to the airport, to the ticket counter, you're immediately brought into that experience. It continues, right? You hear the music, you have the red carpet, everybody's happy. You feel like you're part of this Virgin America experience. When you board the plane, you've got the music, you've got the ambient lighting, you have flight attendants who are smiling, you have the captain who comes out of the cockpit to actually talk to you, to tell you about what the trip is going to be like, sort of makes that engagement. And then if you have a problem, I actually shared a shuttle with a Virgin America crew recently, and they, I talked a little bit about how it's frustrating to see other airlines, and when you go to the ticket counter, you just start to feel sour. Just the rest of the experience is sort of based on that. And they talked a lot about how Virgin America focuses on team building and focuses on keeping their employees happy, making sure that benefits, making sure that everything about their experience as an employee is positive because they know that it's going to impact your experience. You're going to walk away with how they interact with you. One of the interesting things about that little 15-minute shuttle ride, it was such an insightful ride too, was that one of the flight attendants said, we love the culture of the organization and we bring that culture to life for the customer. But that culture has been defined and that culture is reinforced, and we're valued as employees and customers are valued because of all of this. And what's more special is that social media is not anything that, for example, I have to use as a flight attendant, but I hear all the time as we're flying, if a customer has a negative experience with maybe the sandwich is horrible or maybe their drink is taking longer, they'll tweet about it. Virgin America will hear it, respond, and the problems are solved before the flight attendant even knows they're a problem. And in fact, many times the flight attendant never even knew about the problem. It was just handled. So you have this whole ecosystem that's designed about keeping the customer experience happy because they know that the connected customer, especially when you're providing Wi-Fi at 40,000 feet, is going to share the things they like and the things they don't like. And the more that they share that they like, the better it is because that has a tremendous network effect. That multiplies over time. So the long story short is that was a designed experience that's reinforced over time where social media becomes an enabler, but everything else is equally important.
I think there's two big trends here, especially for our audience. The first one is obviously it's not about the tools, it's really about the culture, and if you have the opportunity of getting this started, the better you're going to be off.
Sure.
The other aspect is, of course, the communication channel now is both ways, and your consumers or your customers now have the tools to express how they feel at scale, so you really do have to build a system. You talk about this the set of metric around action, reaction, and transaction, which is really, I think, the way you want people to think about social media measurement. Can you take us through what it looks like? Action, reaction, transaction?
Well, right now, if you ask social media professionals, what's your program designed to do? And it always brings up interesting discussions. I try to stay positive around it. I try to say, no, that's not how you're supposed to look at it. I just try to say, look, how do we turn that into something that's going to be meaningful for you, the people you're trying to reach or people you're trying to influence? So it's not just about having a conversation. It's not just about being two-way. It's not just about listening per se. It's about showing that you're designing experiences that have outcomes. So what are those outcomes? I like to work backwards. I say, this is where we're trying to get.
Yeah.
And come back to how we're going to design those experiences. So are we trying to get to more positive sentiment? Are we trying to get to more leads? Are we trying to get to a reduction in customer negative calls or emails? What have you? It could be or all of the above, because it probably should be all of the above. But then the programs then have to be designed intentionally to deliver those. Every single one of those is measured around actions, transactions, and reactions, because they have to have, quite honestly, some sort of click, some sort of engagement that shifts whatever it is that you're doing over here to a measurable outcome on this side. So when I say actions, transactions, and reactions, it really is any combination of one of those things on how you design. Do you want somebody to take a click to make a purchase? Do you want somebody to respond as a form of referral, for example? Yeah. Do you want somebody to actually buy or send a lead based on this particular instance? There's so many variables of that, but really those have to be designed. And it's not anything new. Again, social media has this weird way of just sort of disrupting common sense. And that's okay. But because a lot of this is evolving, really what we're looking at is just kind of like the internet marketing playbook. How do you take actions, make them in transactions, measure their conversions, and then optimize for future performance? Now that sort of takes all of the emotion and the human nature side out of it, which is what's really important in terms of social science. But really, it's a foundation. Yeah. You just apply all of the good stuff on top of it. But you have to have something to measure.
So we've talked about quite a few things here, and on June 30th, we're going to give you access to this great tool on Twitter Analytics, which is right here, and it allows you to take a look at some of the things we've discussed. How many tweets, who are the influencers, what's negative, what's positive. We have a tone directory, dictionary, I should say. How do you feel about this type of tool? What do you think people should use it as?
Well, I think this should be the dashboard, the new screensaver for a social media professional, right? I mean, you should know what's going on in real time. I think really, it's actually I guess you'll see it when it's released, but it's a lovely tool, and it's very simple, but yet the information that's here is very informative. And so I would look at this and say, again, this is data, right? And you have this old saying in any type of data or research, and that is analysis can cause paralysis. What do you do with this data? And this is your job, and this is why it becomes so important, is that you have to figure out how you drill down to this to not just get the numbers moving in a particular direction, right? That's the job of a KPI. But when you're looking at ROI or outcomes, how do you steer this in the direction that you want? And that's going to come down to, for example, the Virgin America discussion. It has to be intentionally designed to evoke this experience, but also drive certain outcomes. Transactions, actions, and reactions. So for example, you could drill down, I'd imagine, into any one of these things to see what's causing the negative, what's causing the positive, and really start to study it, so that way you can design programs around it that really change this. When we look at KPIs, you have raw numbers, you have the percentage of change, and then you have the overall measurement of progress. Yeah. So when we look at things like that and we apply this data and the insights behind that data to any one of those three things, you actually start to build programs that have the end in mind, so you can reverse engineer it based on this information to design more meaningful engagement. And that's really what it's about. Social media becomes an enabler of an extended brand experience. That brand experience has been defined through actions. It's been reinforced through culture and through language, so reactions, and then also just designed outcomes, so transactions. I mean, it really comes down to both social science and then just regular good old-fashioned business metrics and performance optimization. It's not, I mean, that sentence even sounded complicated to say. It's not that hard. The thing that I want to just end with is that what you want to do as you're looking at these numbers, because this is really helpful, is that you want to basically find a way to bring these numbers to life. The key for any successful marketer or any business professional looking at new media in the future is to figure out how these numbers translate into empathy, because empathy is actually the trigger for social media, in many ways, so in new media. So whether it's Twitter or whether it's a mobile phone app or whether it's just something that you see in real life, there needs to be some sort of demonstration of not just that you're listening, that you're hearing, and that you're taking action based on what you heard. So I hear you, I'm not just listening to you, and here's what we're doing about it. Empathy is the biggest driver, and so your job is to take this data and translate it into into a human touch.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
If people want to find out more, of course, they could read your books, but where should they go?
Oh, well, briansolis.com is a good place, or at Brian Solis on Twitter, or definitely pick up the new Engage that's out there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until next time, I'm Bruno Aziza.